Eastern State Penitentiary. Even today, the name alone sends a chill down the spine. But in 1829, when its massive stone gates first creaked open, this place was hailed as a marvel of modern design. A beacon of progress. It was the first true penitentiary, designed not just to imprison, but to reform, or so they claimed. But the men who entered these walls didn't find redemption. No, what they found was a nightmare. The architects of Eastern State believed that solitude, complete and total isolation, was the key to repentance. Their plan was simple: lock each prisoner away in a tiny cell. No contact with the outside world, no contact with other prisoners, no contact with anyone. Alone, for days, for weeks, for years. Imagine it, day after day, locked in a cell no larger than a closet. The only light comes from a narrow slit high in the ceiling. The only sounds, the slow, steady thud of your heartbeat and the occasional drip of water from the damp stone walls. For 23 hours a day, prisoners would sit in absolute silence. No voices, no laughter, no screams. The only human contact they had was a single guard, who brought them their meals, without a word, without even a glance. And in that silence, the prisoners began to break. Slowly at first, but surely. At first, they tried to hold on to their sanity, but the days blurred into nights, and the nights into weeks. In the silence, strange things began to happen. Some prisoners claimed to hear whispers. Faint, almost imperceptible at first, a soft voice calling their name from the other side of the wall. They would bang on the door, shout for the guard, but no one ever answered. As the weeks stretched into months, the voices grew louder, more distinct. No longer whispers, but conversations. Murmurs of men talking, laughing, weeping. The prisoners swore they heard others nearby. But when they were let out for their 1 hour of exercise, they saw no one. No other prisoners. No one to match the voices they heard. Then came the shadows. Dark figures that danced along the walls, just out of reach. At first, the prisoners thought they were tricks of the light. But as the shadows grew, taking shape, they began to feel eyes on them. Cold, invisible eyes watching from the corners of their cells. Some prisoners claimed to feel a presence in their cells at night. A weight on their chest, pressing down, making it hard to breathe. They would lie awake, frozen, unable to move, as if something was holding them in place. When they tried to cry out, their voices would die in their throats. Was it madness, or was it something more? Eastern State Penitentiary was meant to reform men, but instead, it broke them, shattered their minds, and the prison took more than just their sanity, it took their souls. Many of those who served time here never truly left. Some died within these walls. Others left, but their minds were already gone, lost to the darkness, to the whispers, to the shadows. But a few never left at all. Their bodies may have been buried, but their spirits, they remain. And even now, decades after the last prisoner was released, their presence still lingers, waiting, watching. If you listen closely, you might hear them. The whispers, the soft, indistinct voices that drift through the corridors. Are they the voices of the prisoners, lost in time? Or is it something else? Something darker? Something that has been waiting in the silence for far too long? There are many stories of hauntings within the walls of Eastern State, but none more chilling than the tales of Cell Block 12. This is where the prison's darkness feels most alive. It is here that the shadows are thickest and where the whispers are loudest. For years, visitors have spoken of seeing figures in this part of the prison. At first, they thought it was a trick of the light, a flicker, a movement out of the corner of their eye. But the longer they stayed, the more they realized that something wasn't right. The shadows. They weren't just shadows. Dark, human-like shapes have been spotted moving at the far end of the hall, disappearing into the cells, slipping through the bars as if they weren't even there. People have seen these figures standing silently, watching from the shadows, their faces hidden, their bodies barely more than dark outlines. But when you try to get closer, they vanish, as if they were never there. It's not just the shadows, there's something else here, something colder. Visitors who walk through Cell Block 12 often describe the sensation of being followed. You'll feel it, a presence just behind you, a cold breath on the back of your neck, the unmistakable sensation of eyes boring into your back. But when you turn to look, Nothing. Only the still, empty hallway. Only the shadows, stretching longer than they should. Some visitors have felt a cold hand brush against their skin. Just a faint touch, barely there, but enough to make the hair on their arms stand on end. Others have heard footsteps, slow and deliberate, echoing down the corridor. But no matter how fast they turn, no matter how far they walk, they never find anyone. The shadows aren't the only thing alive in cell block 12. There are voices too. The whispers. The voices start soft, barely audible, like the faint murmur of a distant conversation. At first, you think it's just the wind or maybe the echo of another group of visitors somewhere nearby. But as you listen closer, the voices become clearer, louder. Men's voices, talking, laughing, sometimes crying. They seem to be coming from just behind the wall from the next cell. But when you go to check, there's no one there. Just the empty cells, the crumbling stone. And then, the voices change. They grow more desperate, more insistent. They call out, pleading, begging for release. Some visitors have heard their own names whispered, as if something inside these walls knows them, knows who they are. But when they turn to find the source, there's nothing. Only the silence, only the shadows. Cell Block 12 has seen more than its fair share of suffering. The prisoners who were sent here were the most dangerous, the most broken, and the isolation drove many of them to madness. They spent years in these cells, with nothing but the dark and their own thoughts for company. Some say their spirits never left, that they're still here, trapped within the walls, forever reliving their torment. Others believe the shadows are something darker, something that was born from the suffering and now feeds on the fear of those who walk these halls. Whatever the truth, one thing is certain. Cell Block 12 is not a place to be taken lightly. The shadows, the whispers, they are always watching, always waiting. Even in a place as notorious as Eastern State Penitentiary, there are few prisoners whose names still echo through the halls. But one stands out above the rest: Al Capone. Capone, one of the most infamous criminals in American history, spent nearly a year within these walls. But unlike most prisoners, Capone didn't spend his days in a cold, barren cell. His room was furnished, luxurious by prison standards, a bed, a rug, a radio, comforts that other prisoners could only dream of. But for all his wealth and power, Capone could not escape the darkness that lingered within these walls. He too was haunted. Capone's haunting was different from the others. It wasn't just the shadows. It wasn't just the whispers. No, what haunted Capone was far more personal. For months, Capone was tormented by the ghost of James Clark, one of the men murdered in the St. Valentine's Day massacre. Night after night, Capone would wake up in a cold sweat, screaming for help. He claimed that Clark's ghost would appear in his cell, standing at the foot of his bed, staring at him with cold, dead eyes. The guards would rush to his cell, but when they arrived, they found nothing. Capone was alone, but the fear in his eyes, it was real. At first, the guards thought it was just Capone's guilt, that his mind was playing tricks on him, that the weight of his crimes had finally caught up to him. But Capone insisted. The ghost was real. It came to him every night, watching him, accusing him. And no matter what he did, no matter how much money he offered, no one could make it stop. Capone would wake up screaming, begging for the ghost to leave him alone. But the haunting never stopped. The ghost of James Clark followed him wherever he went, its cold eyes always watching, always waiting. Even after Capone left Eastern State, he claimed the ghost followed him, that it haunted him for the rest of his life. But here, in this cell, is where it all began. Today, Capone's cell stands empty, but those who visit say the air still feels heavy with something unseen. A presence lingering in the room. Some have reported feeling a cold chill as they step inside, as if something or someone is watching them from the shadows. Others have heard strange noises. A soft whisper, a faint knock, a sudden, cold breath on the back of their neck. But when they turn to look, the room is as empty as it has been for decades. The ghost that haunted Capone may be gone, but something remains. Something that has been waiting. And when you step inside, you might feel its eyes on you too. If there is one place in Eastern State Penitentiary that even the guards feared, it was the hole. The punishment cells, buried deep underground, where prisoners were sent to be forgotten. The hole was more than just a prison within a prison. It was a place of total isolation, total darkness, no light, no sound, nothing but the cold stone walls and the suffocating weight of silence. Imagine being locked down here, in the pitch black, with no way of knowing whether it's day or night, no sound but your own breathing, no light but the flicker of a distant torch as the guard seals you inside. And then, nothing. Days, weeks, months of nothing. Alone in the dark. The prisoners who were sent to the hole often spoke of something else being down here with them. At first, they thought it was just their imagination, the isolation playing tricks on their minds. But the longer they stayed, the more convinced they became that they weren't alone. They would hear footsteps in the darkness, soft, slow, deliberate, but when they called out, no one answered. They would hear whispers too, faint voices as if someone was speaking just outside their cell. But when they listened closer, the voices would stop. And then there were the eyes, cold, invisible eyes watching from the dark. Some prisoners claimed they could feel a presence in the cell with them, a weight pressing down on their chest while they tried to sleep. They would lie awake, frozen in place, unable to move, as if something was holding them there. Even today, visitors who step into the hole report feeling an overwhelming sense of dread. The air here is different. It's heavier, colder. Some say it's hard to breathe, as if the walls themselves are pressing in on you. Others have heard the same whispers, the same footsteps that the prisoners once spoke of. And then there are those who claim to have seen something, eyes watching them from the dark, a shadow shifting just out of sight. They felt a cold hand brush against their arm, their neck. But when they turned to look, nothing. The hole was a place of unimaginable suffering, a place where men were left to lose their minds in the dark. Some say the spirits of those who were sent here never left, that they're still trapped in the blackness, forever reliving their torment. And once you step inside, once you feel the cold air wrap around you, you'll know that something is down here with you, something that has been waiting in the dark, and once it finds you, it never really lets go. Eastern State Penitentiary is more than just a relic of the past, more than just a decaying monument to a dark chapter in history. This place is alive with something darker, something that still stirs in the shadows. The whispers, the voices, the footsteps that echo through the halls, they're more than just stories. They're real. The prisoners who once walked these halls may be long gone, but their spirits, they remain. Perhaps they are trapped here, forever reliving their suffering. Or perhaps it's the prison itself that is haunted by the darkness that was born within its walls. Whatever the truth, one thing is certain. Eastern State Penitentiary is not just a place, it's a presence, a living, breathing entity. And once you step inside, the shadows, they never really let you go.